and welcome to my studio. My name is Julia Kelly, and this is my kind of a floss tube number one. I say that because I am a classically trained artist. I have a 4-year art degree. I've taught art to Native American and rural ranch kiddos down at a one-room schoolhouse next to 2 Indian reservations for about 15 years. I have sold my fabric collages, which what I do, what's my medium is, in children's publishing magazines for several years. And recently I started selling my original work through farmers markets locally. I'm probably not really going to follow much. I'm going to vary the format of what most floss tubes have. Thus why I say kind of a floss tube. I also am very interested in women's history, specifically in the West, in America, and through the medium of handiwork and hand-stitched work. My mission statement is to put a new spin on the traditional art form of women's work, and I'm not doing that out of disrespect. I just know that there are so many variations of that, and there have been for the millennial, and I'm really interested in that in our history, the women's history of that I don't think it's highlighted as much as it should. So I was trying to think of the best way to kind of show you what kind of work I do. And because today is the first day of fall, September 23rd, I thought, well, I'm done with the farmer's market. I have 2 huge tubs of stuff in my studio that is taking up room, and I could unpack them and just show you what I had selling at the farmer's market. So I'm going to do that. And yeah, so let's start. So let's see, what do I have we can start with. So this is one of my pieces, and it's in a vintage cookie cutter. And I just had an aha moment one time looking through an antique store where I just absolutely just gravitate towards containers. And I also absolutely hate new cheapy frames that you're kind of forced to use if you buy new without spending a huge amount of money. And kind of realized, those vintage antique frames and things are in antique malls. And then I realized that, there's a lot of other things that can have a little piece of artwork put in them. I usually, here's another bunny. I kind of show people like, well, it's an ornament like for Christmas. And I'm like, well, you can just get a little piece of ribbon and put it on like a dresser knob, a dresser drawer knob, or a cabinet, handle. I also take them, I tie a knot like this, and then I actually shut like something that, a dresser drawer or like a buffet drawer I don't use a lot. I'll just shut the knot in the drawer so they just hang from the drawer, like that. And I have them out seasonally. So these are my bunnies. And I do embroidery work on top of the just fabric applique. Let's see, where are you? And those are wagon wheels, which is an embroidery stitch for flowers. I use a lot of variations of straight stitch or chain stitch on them. I find vintage beads to put on them. These are vintage Mardi Gras beads, probably from the 1950s. They're glass. They're from Yugoslavia. I found them down in Santa Fe. We go down to Santa Fe a lot for just weekend jaunts to eat food and see art and see culture and stuff. So I just am always in a search for supplies. So those are my bunnies. What else do I have here? I've done a lot of Santas. So there's one of my Santas. And he's in a probably a not as old, maybe, I don't know, 60s, 70s copper cookie cutter. And then this one is more like probably the 1930s. I don't have a good source on the history of cookie cutters, just from a collection, or my stash. It's not even really a collection. I just have a stash. I'll show you sometime. There was quite a variation. But then again, the vintage antique beads. But you can see how not everyone is, they're kind of the same, but not quite the same. So again, I can't just make one pattern. I kind of have to customize the patterns. So those are my Santas. This one is needing some work on the balancing. I know better now how to do it, and I'm going to redo this cookie cutter. But there's a turkey, and they're on. I use 100% wool felt for the back, and then I use Velcro. And you can see this is a trick I do. There's a penny or a nickel. So weighting, and I apparently need to put another penny or something in that one to make it weight better. But there is my one of my turkeys. Here's a snowman that I hand stitch the broom straw. And apparently I was in a mood because I hand stitched the scarf. Sometimes I'll do the scarves in fabric, but the eyes and that nose are fabric. I have a technique that I can stitch down that small of a piece of fabric if I think I need to. So again, the vintage Mardi Gras beads. Here is a well, that's interesting. I've lost the things. Kind of get beat up when they go to the farmer's market. I usually kind of have to give them a little TLC when we come back before the holiday. I put them in the Christmas shop. This is I think turn of the century vintage tin cookie cutter. And this is an example. I literally just trace a shape and then I draw inside that to figure out the shape. I would love to decorate cookies as detailed as I've seen, like Google Hungarian cookie decorating, and you're just like, this cannot be a cookie. I'm way too messy to do that with cookies, but I can do it with fabric collage. I mean, fabric applique. You know, I call it fabric collage. Technically it's called raw edge applique. I don't turn anything over. I use a fusible web. I iron on the backs a fusible web, and then cut my shapes out, iron them down, and then I stitch the edges. So that's my Christmas dog who needs a new top. I also do pin cushions. You know, just I think maybe that was a candle. And so this is the sun with a lot of stitching on it. And I have a technique that I can get the shape of this to then turn in. Then I can make the shape, recreate the shape for the bottom of the pin cushion. So that is my sun. I'm also, here's another one. This I think is like a old Jello mold. And again, I got the shape of the mold. And that is a butterfly. And I think this one is made out of that kind of double woven towels, linen towels that you can get. And I have been known, if I can't find what I need in the studio, sometimes I have been known to go peruse other fabric in my house, be it my husband's shirts or tea towels, which is horrible. But I live in a very remote area, and sometimes I just don't want to wait before I get somewhere that has more choices of fabric. But That is a butterfly pincushion. My business name is Moonflower Studio, so I do a lot of moons. And this is kind of inspired by the first sci-fi film, Trip to the Moon. You know, when they have like the rocket in the eye. And that one actually has some metallic thread on it, which I don't really like using because I don't have the patience for it. But apparently I thought it really needed to be glistening, that star. So I think this is in a vintage biscuit cutter. I think that's what that is. So there is my trip to the moon, or my moon. I do bigger work than that. I take to the farmer's market. I use a lot of film canisters. I think these might actually have come from when we were consolidating my husband's family home. And this is, again, with the Mardi Gras beads. This is a cactus wren that we went down to Tucson, the Tucson Scottsdale area, one spring break with our kids and another family to have a vacation. And we just hit the desert at the perfect moment when it was in bloom. And it is just one of the most amazing sights. I want to get down there on purpose again to see that. But that is a cactus wren, and that's a prickly pear cactus. And these are all French knotted, and then just a little bit of embroidery work in there to just give it some dimension. This is a slightly bigger film canister, and it is see if I can do this and so you can see and I can see. It is of allium with moths on it. And all the allium is just a purple circle that I then stitched a whole bunch of daisy chain loop daisy flower stitches all over that. And then the stem is embroidery work, and then this is raised, and that is called couching, where I think I put in another piece of fabric underneath that thread to just give it some height. So that is moths and allium. And that is, let me see. Oh, that is my first group. Let me pause and I will show you some more. Okay, so I also like putting things in the vintage, maybe like 1950, maybe older coffee cans. And I thought, well, I was inspired because my grandmother was a full-blood Dane and always had a coffee break in the afternoon. So I thought, oh, I'll do women having coffee breaks. What was interesting is this one I did off of the style of the can, and I know they're not quite aligned. They're designed to swivel when you put them down where you're going to keep them. There's a whole system so they don't roll, and then you swivel the pitcher to be right. And I'm not going to try and swivel them like this, but they do. There's a way to make them where you can align however you want the coffee can to be, and then you can swivel the pitcher. But yeah, this one is just designed off of the butternut coffee can. She's a little more of she's like a city girl. She's like a little more spiffy than our family. Our family were farmers. And so this one is what I imagine my grandmother would be like in the 50s, having her coffee break. And what cracked me up is when I started to research reference photos off of old advertising, magazine advertising for coffee. I couldn't find advertising to encourage women to have Folgers when they sat down for their coffee. I found a lot of women making coffee. I found a lot of women getting ready for their husbands to come home and take a break and put their feet up, but I didn't find anything about the women being encouraged to, consume something and sit down and take a break. And my grandma, my childhood memories are of my grandma taking coffee breaks in the afternoon. She's a full-blood Dane. Her Her mother came over from Denmark. Her father's parents came over from Denmark. Most of my family's in southern Minnesota. And coffee and taking a break in the day was my childhood. She would sit on the couch, and she probably would have already kind of gotten dinner started a little bit, and then take a break while something was kind of cooking. And she always needed something sweet, a cookie or a little piece of a Snicker bar, and she would look out the window. So that's what this is inspired by. She had Fiesta ware. But yeah, so that's another thing I do in coffee cans. I also discovered wooden cheese boxes. And oddly, yeah, people used to get their processed cheese in a wooden box. I usually find the boxes more easily in areas that were dairy farmers. So apparently dairy farmers like their cheese, like their processed cheese. And you'll find an area that has like antique malls that there's like a dozen of these, and then you'll be in another area where you can't find one. So I don't, I find that interesting. But yeah, so wooden boxes, I'm not 100% sure what era those would be. I haven't really come across that information. But this is my fox. This is my winter fox in a cheese box. And he's looking behind him at the moon. This one doesn't really have a lot of embroidery. It's more just applique or fabric collage. The trees are stitched across with thread, just a straight stitch. But then mostly it's applique. The boxes came in 2 sizes. 2 pound is this size, and then 5 pound is this size. And then I have my raccoon mom and babies in this one. And I was very inspired by cosmos. I'm not the best gardener, but a lot of times in the spring I'll just be thinking about one kind of flower, and this year it was cosmos. So that's my raccoon in a cheese box. And one moment. Oh, I think I can just, one moment. I only bring up to a certain price point at the farmer's market. I generally do smaller work in the farmer's market. This is the biggest things I sell, or I display more for people to buy the prints of them at the farmer's market than probably the originals, although that's fine if they want to. These again are film canisters that I found in a little antique shop up towards Telluride, which is up in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado, more north that way. And I love that they still have the tape on it from the film. But this is my hair and poppies. And again, it's literally just same technique of laying down that fabric collage or applique. And then I do some embroidery work on top of it. But I usually have anything big like this, I always have prints and cards available too for people if they're interested. So that is hair and poppies. And then this is, I always do a Christmas design. And this is a few years ago, Christmas. It was inspired by the hymn In the Bleak Midwinter. And I used this image and then put it into Photoshop and did some other stuff with it to make my Christmas card. But that is, I had 3 greens that I just cut, different leaf shapes out and layered and layered and layered until I was happy. Stitched those all down. Added the pine cones. It's not real stitch heavy. It doesn't really have a lot of embroidery work on it. Just some texture on the pine cones and some French knots on the berries. But again, that's more just applique and not so much embroidery work. So those are 2 of my bigger work. Those are 2 of the biggest works that I took to the farmer's market this year. And I could show you some of the prints and some of the cards of different things that I have. But again, even what I've shown you, the best way to really get a good look at them, if you're interested, is to go to my website, to moonflowerstudio.biz, not .com, but .biz, and look, just click on the portfolio tab, and it'll say gallery, which are my bigger work, and then little things is my smaller work. And if you click on those two pages, you'll be able to see more of that. So that's just an example of what I was selling this year at the farmer's market. So now, again, trying to figure out how to get all these parts in without making this be 3 hours. I think bullet points are the best way to do this. I actually thought about reading off a list of bullet points. But the year before the pandemic, I actually did really well at the farmer's market. I started to get my name out. I was like, so then, like I said, we're in the Four Corners region, which is very isolated, but it's a high tourist destination. I'm looking out right now at Mesa Verde National Park. Like, it fills up my window. We're in the valley below that. In the southwest corner of Colorado. That direction, it is, kind of more that direction, is Moab, Utah, that has Arches National Park. It has Canyonlands National Park, and Moab, which is another high destination place. And then directly behind me, the opposite direction in Colorado, going slightly north, is the San Juan Mountains, the South San Juans with Telluride. I actually am wearing a Telluride, one of my Telluride sweatshirts that I saw a thing about, I picked a career, what was it? It was the Brooke Shields Christmas movie, with Carrie, what was his last name? The Princess Bride actor, Carrie Lose, a cute movie that came out, and she's in her New York apartment. She's a writer who kind of gets disgraced and then kind of goes and hides in Scotland. It's just a fun movie, Christmas movie. But she says after she gets disgraced, her daughter is kind of concerned about her college-age daughter, and Brooke Shields' character says, well, I picked a career that I could be in my yoga pants and a hoodie. And I'm like, I kind of picked a career I could be in my yoga pants and a hoodie too, as an artist. So, but that's a tangent. So why was I talking about Telluride? Oh, this is a very touristy area, and Telluride has a phenomenal farmers market on Fridays through the summer. I mean, it's phenomenal. And of course, you're getting all of that touristy stuff. So I had actually set up to go also sell in Telluride on occasion, right before the pandemic. So, I mean, as an artist, my momentum was, just rolling down a hill. And then kaboom, the pandemic started, and it just came to a screeching halt. Like nobody was selling art. Like, art is not something in crisis that societies, and they shouldn't. There's a lot more important things than art selling, but it just stopped. And so, pondering, well, what am I going to do? And then, kind of the artist thing is to be hidden away in your studio, wearing your yoga pants and a hoodie and just making art. I thought, well, I could make new lines. I can, really, do interesting things. I can explore. And I, pre-pandemic, had no knowledge of Flosstude. I had no knowledge of that there had been a renaissance in stitching, cross stitch, handiwork. I had not found that. Again, very isolated. It'd have to come across the internet to me, and for some reason I still don't understand. I did not know. Man, if I had known that people were putting up floss tubes like in 2016, 2017, oh my Lord. I don't, it must have been a God thing. He must have been just like, yeah, this isn't your time. But I didn't know that cross stitch had a resurgence. I should say cross stitch was my gateway drug into stitching. When I was 15, back in the 80s, I grew up in Loveland in suburbianness, in just below Fort Collins, and most of my family's in Minnesota, and my great grandmother passed away, and just part of her belongings that came to Colorado. My aunt, a couple of my aunts and uncles went back when they were cleaning out her house, and then they brought back to Colorado. We're a very small section of this larger family that's mostly in Minnesota. When they brought back kind of our allotment, I was given, because I kind of was the only artsy kid, I think, her stitchy box. Like her, literally, it was a colonial bucket with like a lid, what she probably had next to her chair. And it still kind of just makes me, tear up to think about. I never got a stitch with her. I didn't get to see her that much because she was in Minnesota and I was in Colorado. But yeah, I got her embroidery box, and it had just random embroidery threads and needles and a hoop and a little bit of fabric, and I just started fiddling around with it. I just started playing around with it. I was an artsy kid, so I could, draw out embroidery shapes and fill them in and play around, figure out some things. And somehow maybe I came across some stitching books, because there certainly was not internet then. But then when I was 16, I could drive, and I had some spending money. And Loveland was a bedroom community, so all your entertainment, shopping, eating out, you went up to Fort Collins, and the mall up in Fort Collins had a pretty decent big embroidery cross-stitch store. And I remember going in there and getting kits, and just thinking it was huge. I don't know if it was really huge. It felt huge. But pretty quick, I would kind of buy the kits just to get the fabric and the thread, because again, as an artsy kid, I wanted to do my own thing. So yeah, so that was my gateway drug. But I have dyslexia. I wrote my letters backwards. I really struggled in the lower grades of school until I kind of figured it out, and my reading level kind of got up to par. But I always knew I wanted to go on to get an art degree and work in children's education, kind of through art. Because that's kind of the way art was what saved me from the struggles of having dyslexia. And but I always knew I wanted to go to art school, and of course I was going to be an artist. And I got the chance to go to Paris between my senior year and college, and got to go to the Louvre and see Mona Lisa and the Davids, and the winged Venus at the top of the stairs. And I forgot about stitching. It was not something I thought of. So I went through art school with the intention of going on to art therapy, brand new. All the therapies, play therapy, music therapy, and art therapy were just starting again then. And I saw a paper ad on a bulletin board out in the hallway of the art department. And I was like, that just sounds wonderful, to work through psychology through art. And so I did my classes in a way where I have a lot of fine art classes, but then I also have education classes, and then psychology and children developmental classes. But then I met a local boy. I went to school here. I went to school in Durango. The idea of going on the west slope of Colorado, there are more than one Colorados. There's about 3 of them. The culture is very different in eastern Colorado on the plains. It's very different on that I-25 corridor on the east side, the front range of Colorado, and then it's called the west slope of Colorado, is the west side of the Continental Divide, and we're very different over here than the other side of the mountain. But the idea of going to college in a mountain town just to me seemed like the most romantic, exciting thing in the world, ski bums and guys in pickup trucks. But I ended up meeting a local boy and married him and haven't left. And then once I was married, I just wanted to stay home and literally raise babies. That's all I wanted. That's all I ever wanted, really. It was kind of like what I do until I become a mom, you know. So I had the privilege of staying home with raising we have two girls, and I always just kind of pursued art on the sideline, you know, different things. I wove baskets for a while, and then I got into children's publishing, and I always had good ideas, and I could draw well. Like, that was my plus, is I could really draw strongly. I just couldn't finish things. Like, I tried oils, I tried watercolor, I tried pen and ink. After college, I took more classes in art theory, in color theory, in illustration, trying to find, because I really wanted to illustrate children's work in the children's publishing, magazines, curriculum, books, you know, that kind of thing. And I just didn't have a strong enough style to make that happen. And so I spent a lot of years with little babies just drawing and painting and drawing and painting and trying to figure out, you know, how to get a better style. Until my daughter, and again, more of that later. That's like a whole couple videos. But my daughter, when she was my oldest daughter, when maybe she was like 3rd grade, the school was having a sock hop, and I thought, well, I can whip together a poodle skirt. So I had a stash of wool, and I cut out you know, a circle, and like in minutes cut out the shape of a poodle and put a little flappy ear on it and covered the puffs of the poodle in French knots, and honestly just had another aha moment of like, I love this. You know, this is fun. This is not hard. This is fun, you know, and why can't I do illustration with fabric collage? You know, why does it have to be one of these set other mediums that's kind of more traditional? Why can't I use fabric collage? And so I developed that. Again, a whole nother video, and I'll pull out my work and kind of show you my process. So I developed a style and sent it out to art directors and publishers, advertised, and I had some success in it. I have my fabric collage, just like what I showed you, in several children's magazines. NPR, National Public Radio, has a calendar. They found me, and I got to be one of the months in their calendar of illustrators. Yeah, it was exciting. But you know, things change, and you have to go with the punches. And it was kind of the era that publishing went through a lot of changes. Again, a whole nother video. And I just kind of got to a point where I wanted to sell my original work. And through this time, I also was teaching, like I said, the rural ranch and the ranch kiddos and the Native American kiddos. All these things have always been like a little part-time. So it's none of them have been full-time things. I also have worked through art with exceptional ed or autistic kids. Worked in the school system with that, and that was probably the closest I got to if I had gone on to get my master's in art therapy. And I'm glad I had that year to experience that. So I mean, I've done a lot of different things, but right before the pandemic, I just decided I really want to focus on selling my own work, just in my gallery, selling my own work. And for whatever reason, Flosstude had not popped up, which I still don't understand. So pandemic hits, and I'm like, okay, I'll just work in my studio. And I think probably if that had gone the way I was planning, I would have found Flosstude, and I would have, that was 2020. I would have started then what I'm trying to start now, because I seriously, like I said, really wanted to do an art channel, kind of like the writer's tube. It's something I've always been pondering for a long time, how to do it. Um, but then the pandemic hit, and this is the point that I'm like, I don't want to belabor, um, that period of time, because you don't need to hear it. I'm sure you have your own story, and we don't need to relive it. So it was like the Grand Canyon of, we all kind of fell into it, but then us personally, pretty quickly, my husband's father was 93. He had my husband old. He was very old when he had my husband, and he got bucked off a horse. I don't know. Yes, and the joke is how does a 94-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever old he was then, get bucked off a horse? He can still get on a horse, and he was that age and could still get on a horse. And he had friends that would pick him up and take him on trail rides, and we highly encouraged him to be careful. But he got bucked off. He broke his hip. He went into the hospital system in the worst possible time to have to go into the hospital system. And he had rapid dementia, and which came first, we really don't know. We don't know if there were just things we didn't notice, or he got COVID through that, or getting the COVID made him go into rapid dementia. But basically, for 2 years, my husband had to manage his dad's care. We live on an old apple orchard homestead that we have been renovating. And there's 2 houses on it, and his dad lived for 13 years, for my entire children's life. Their grandparents have basically been right there. But by himself, after his mother passed away, his dad lived for about 13 years in a house like I'm looking at between me and Mesa Verde. So we thought we could get him home if we did renovation on this house. He didn't let us do a lot of renovation, so it was in pretty bad repair. But it needed some ramps and some wider doors. So he took care of his dad, and I managed what turned into a complete renovation down to the guts of the house. It's a historical house. Again, whole video later. But it was all consuming for 18 months of through that. And my studio became a gigantic junk room. We were incorporating 2 houses into one. Let's just say that there was just no way I was going to find Flosstude through the pandemic. And there was hardly any time I actually could do art through the pandemic. I remember walking between the 2 houses and kind of whimpering and looking out the window of my studio and just thinking, will I ever be able to, do that again? But so didn't find Flosstube. And then 2022, people were kind of coming out of the pandemic. There certainly was options available out and about. We actually early in that year lost both our dads, our fathers, mine from a distance. And then his dad did pass away when he was like 97, 96. And but the year wasn't all horrible. One of our daughters decided to get married, and she did the ceremony part on the homestead at sunrise. My husband married him in our apricot grove, and then they wanted to do the party celebration reception part of the wedding in December of last year in Santa Fe. Like I said, we've gone down to Santa Fe since they were little girls, and they, it's just part of their home is Santa Fe. So it was wonderful, but I ended up breaking my foot a year, end of October, it'll be a year ago. So we were getting ready for this early December wedding, and I stepped off my stoop, and my bone, the long part of the outside of your foot bone, it's called a Jones fracture, and it's literally what ballerinas and extreme athlete skid. It's a major fracture. So it's just, so I had a backpacking accident 20 years ago. And I think I honestly think my foot just took 20 years to break completely. So I had foot surgery right after Thanksgiving, a week before this wedding. And long story short, which just hasn't been short, after all that happened, after all of 22 happened, good and the bad, just like the 4 weddings and a funeral movie of Hugh Grant, we literally had 2 funerals and 2 weddings, basically, and a broken foot and foot surgery. So I'm sitting on the couch, like after Christmas. My younger daughter, was a great help, but then she finally went back to college, and I'm on the couch. It's like the angel sang, and Teresa Kogut came on, like video, like YouTube's like, oh, here's a video you might be interested in, and I never had seen her. I didn't know about her, and sweet lady, talented lady. Oh my goodness, her folk art is wonderful. And I literally thought her channel was called Flosstude. I had never heard the word. I thought that's kind of weird. It kind of sounds like writer's tube. It was kind of like, author's tube. I wanted what's Flosstude? I had Googled, previously I had Googled, on YouTube, things that I thought would bring up artists, artists in their studio channels. And I was using words like embroidery or fiber or applique or stitch. Yeah, didn't come up. I never thought to use floss, because I don't call it floss, which I'm trying to call it floss. I call it thread. So maybe that's it. I don't know. So yeah, so Teresa Kogut's channel came up. I literally thought it was just the name of her channel. Enjoyed a couple videos, and then I think I started in the suggestions. I started seeing that word Flosstube, and I'm like, well, okay, so this is like AuthorTube. And then I started watching, other people, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was kind of like Nightmare Before Christmas when Jack Skellington is like moping through the cemetery, woe is me. That was kind of me at the end of, the beginning of 2023. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't done art in 3 years. We turned this, when Grandpa wasn't able to go home, we decided to turn this house into a vacation rental. It's so close to our house and it's a apple orchard we work around there, and the idea of having it be a long-term rental, we need to be down there working in the orchard and stuff. So it just seemed logical. And like I said, we're at the base of Mesa Verde. So I had gotten that done. That was done. It was a operating, not in the wintertime because we had 36 inches of snow, but we had 1 season of that, operating as a vacation rental. So that was kind of done. That project was done. We weren't taking care of aging parents anymore. We had kind of consolidated the houses. That was kind of done. And I had a broken foot, so I couldn't do anything. The weddings were wonderful, but they were done. She was married off, and it was like my muse was gone. My channel is called Moonflower Musing, and the muse is like kind of the inspiration place that artists and writers draw from. And it took a vacation. Like, I don't even know where it was. Like, I had no new idea. I had no new spark of an idea. I did stitching as therapy. I had old work that I knew I had to get the muse back. I had to stitch. So I had applique and embroidery work that I would just pull out, and kind of work on something that was already started. But I had no new ideas, none. And I could kind of, by, pretty, like, I think mid-January, I could kind of move around. Like, I was in a boot at that point. I could put some weight on my foot, but I could hardly go anywhere, because of the 2.5 feet of snow. And so, yeah, like Teresa Kogut came on, and then these other Flosstubers came on, and, just like Jack Skellington kind of, after he goes through the, sadly through the cemetery and sings a song, he comes to the ring of trees and falls down the hole into Christmas Town. And I swear it was like I fell down the hole into Flosstude Town. Like all of a sudden, I'm like, are you kidding me? Cross stitch? People are cross stitching? I mean, I know people have never stopped cross stitching. I mean, it's just like, oh, nobody cross. I hate when people say that. I know people were always cross stitching. I just couldn't find it. I couldn't tap into it. I mean, quilt stores, I would just search around. Here we have a lot of quilters in the area, but it was solely quilting. Like they didn't have a corner. Luckily my quilt shop has a DMC tower, but they're the only ones in the area. We have about 4 towns that I can kind of peruse, and little towns, very little rural towns. And they're the only ones who have DMC floss. But they don't have anything else. They have all the quilting stuff. It's a really good quilt store. And then they have the DMC floss. So, yeah, I mean, but I was just like Jack Skellington, like going around. What's the song he sings? Like, what's that? What's that? What's this? What's this? I think is the lyrics. That women are newly designing, like new styles. Women are over dyeing, hand dyeing thread and fabric. Women are running shops, either brick and mortar or online. I was dumbfounded. I was so dumbfounded. And then and it's even like when Jack Skellington gets back to Halloween Town and he's trying to get everyone to understand, but, I mean, I was just like that. Like my husband and my kids, I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. It's like a renaissance in handiwork. Like women are doing these things, that they're having these boutique businesses. They're taking care of their kids and their families and their home and doing these, like the internet has found a way through YouTube to give women back, an industry. And I mean, I get that, like, well, men cross stitch too. Yes, men cross stitch. Yes, men quilt. Yes, men, do handiwork. But there's a really good documentary. PBS does a series called Crafts in America. And you can Google it. There's like 7 seasons. It's a really good highlight of all kinds of crafts in America. And they've done a lot on quilting. And, in one of them, one of the male quilters says, don't be fooled. We are guests. I think that's the phrase he used. We are guests in a women industry. And I'm not willing to give up. I'm not willing to share this one. We barely have any, we don't have a lot of women-led industries, so we need to keep this one. And handiwork has just such a deep-rooted history that has not been well documented, and it has not been well appreciated. The Proverbs 31 woman, I don't understand why her reputation is being chaste and quiet and sweet, and that's why her children rise up and call her blessed. They rise up and call her blessed because she takes care of everything. She manages her house. She manages her family. She is in charge of her household to the point that she sells cloth. And the verse in the Bible that people don't talk about is the phrase is, so her husband can be at the gate. And what that means is she was his manager, his handler. She did everything to free him up to then go out. He went out and did his job outside the home. And at the gate is a reference to government in that time. So he worked in government. Or, you find references if you go back to, ancient Syria or, writings from Egypt or Rome, not so much Rome and Greek because they treated their women slightly differently. But if men did trading, commerce, were in war, whatever those scenarios were, the women were the ones who kept the house, not the men. The men went out and did something. And and I just love the phrase, she sold cloth, like, oh, and she sold cloth. Well, do you understand what that means? She sold cloth in her home that she was managing. Another tangent. That's why, again, I say this is kind of a floss tube. But yeah, but I just binge watched all these things like in a 2-day period. The problem was that the problem was, it was the middle of January. There was 3 feet of snow on the ground, and I had a broken foot. And I live in the middle of nowhere. There's no Michaels. There's no Joann's. There's no Ada cloth anywhere well, let me take that back. There's small count Ada cloth, so big hold Ada cloth, like the 10, 11, the 10, 12, maybe 14 nearby. So I literally hobbled, like barely could walk, hobbled down to this quilt shop, thinking that maybe they would have a kit or maybe some Ada cloth. And I found 14, which I really didn't want to go that big for holes. So our Walmart is all we got. But the craft section's not bad. Like, I mean, sometimes I get lucky going there. So I hobbled over to Walmart and got kind of lucky. And there was kits that had 18 count. I remember it was a cat. It was a little kitty cat. But it had 18 count Ada in it. So I took it home. I had already perused online. I didn't know any source. Like, I didn't know names, and nothing again was coming up in my cold Google search. I don't know what I was typing in. So I think I got some weird stuff through Amazon because I thought that was the fastest way to get it. But UPS, does take a while. We don't have next day service here. Let's just put it that way. So, my husband is going down to plant rhubarb and lavender at the vacation rental. We have like this tin shed that we put planter beds around, and so we want rhubarb again. Our 30-year-old rhubarb plants finally bit the dust. So found the 18 Ada to just entertain myself with until the Amazon came, and just started fiddling around with it. And then in that process, I started to think, how many designs do I have from applique that are pretty much ready to just feed into? And I had gotten some software on my computer, cross-stitch software. And I'm like, how many designs do I think I have that with very little effort I could turn into a cross-stitch pattern? So let me show you, just one moment. So this is my design Bible, or kind of what I use. I put to sketch out my ideas. And I just started going through it, and you can see some of these papers sticking out, but there's more that you can't see. I counted up, I think, 20 plus designs that were pretty much worked out to the level that to feed them in and start making patterns off of them would not be hard. So, I mean, that was like, okay. So I have the designs. Problem is, I hadn't cross-stitched in 30 years. So I thought I better, actually do some cross-stitch. So something that's probably, I think, not, I don't think self-trained artists do this. I mean, they might, but in a classically trained artist, you're kind of taught to keep redoing and redoing and redoing and redoing the same thing to kind of gain skill. So like in the Japanese tradition, I think, I mean, I remember reading that you might be required to make 500 arrows before you can make a bow. Just over and over and over again, make arrows, arrows, arrows. Or like in printing, you might be required um, to redo a master's, like another, someone before you who's teaching you a master, their design on a wood block 15 times, just continuously over and over and over again. Painting, recreating and painting again and again and again the same. And again, not to like put up on the wall or to show off, but to just gain skill. So I kind of take that system with my work when I'm trying to learn something new. I'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Well, I decided to start with my bunny, my applique bunny. So I fed it into my software, and like I said, I only had white Aida. I didn't have anything else. And this is my first cross stitch bunny. And all of this is cross stitch. Like this isn't the background. That's the Aida, the white. And I didn't even finish it. Like I was just, and then I figured out if I could finish it with the same method that I do the applique, finish it the same way. So that's my first bunny. And then I, changed some things and had some different ideas. And so this is my second bunny. And by this time I had gotten the Zweigart blue Aida 18. So I didn't fill in the back. So that's one of, and these are only a few examples. I probably have 3 or 4 more that I'm not showing you that maybe I didn't even, there are a lot of these that I never even finished. I was just fiddling around. So, maybe this is bunny number 6. I don't remember. But then I finally got a cross stitch version of my bunny. Finished it kind of the same way, a little different, and then to stick in there. The problem is by this time, well, let me back up. No, the problem is by this time, I was really pushing the dates to release spring and early summer designs. Like it was starting to seem like it was too late to do that, but I was trying. I eventually ordered, literally sitting in the parking lot of the Michaels in Santa Fe. In February, we had gone down to Santa Fe for our anniversary, and I went into Michaels to see what they had and wasn't really impressed and was so frustrated. I still was in a boot. No, I was just out of a boot. Like I could walk, like early February, I didn't have to wear the boot to Santa Fe. But again, walking was hard. Like I almost had, like walking without the boot was like taking a step back, to just walk. And I couldn't walk far and I couldn't stand long, I remember. But the Best Buy and the Michaels are next to each other in Santa Fe. And I went into Michaels, came back, sat in the car. And then my husband went into Best Buy. And while he was in Best Buy, I did a huge order of Roxy Floss Co. in Canada through Evertote. Caroline and Carrie, I watched their Flosstude. I want to say this is some of Carrie, maybe Hickory. I could be wrong, but I think that light brown is Carrie's Floss Co. Hickory. So I had gotten that. I had I had discovered 1, 2, 3 stitch. So I had got, no, did I? No, I don't think I discovered 1, 2, 3 stitch yet. I was still going off of Amazon. I had colored Zweigart 18 count Aida. But then unfortunately, in March, we had extended family, very sudden death back in Minnesota. And I we went back to Minnesota. And after I was staying with one cousin in one of the towns, and we were getting on the interstate to go somewhere we needed to go for the family. And the sign said Blue Earth, Minnesota. And I was like, my gosh, you're like 30 miles from Blue Earth, Minnesota. And she's like, yeah. And so when the funeral commitments were done before we flew out on Sunday, her and I went over to Blue Earth, and I got to go into Welcome Stitchery with Justine and Shelley, and they are the most wonderful people in the world. They're hilarious, and they're so cheerful, and they're so kind. And I walk into Justine, cold, like it was cold in Minnesota, but also just straight cold, and like, I am a designer, and I am wanting to put some of my designs as cross stitch, and can you talk to me about fabric? And she believed me. She didn't have to, but she believed me and was very patient, and really shared a lot about the different kinds of Aida, the different kinds of linen, why people like this, why people like that, different counts she thought were more popular than other counts, and just really gave me a lot of information. And I bought a bunch of fabric from her, brought it home, and was able to kind of experiment more with it and play around more with it. And that was wonderful to not only have the hand-dyed floss from Carrie in Canada, but then to have, gotten hand-dyed fabric from Justine in Minnesota. And then I did kind of zoom in on 1, 2, 3 stitch, and then I was able to get online and kind of understood what I was seeing, and was able to, have sources for, I just got distracted. There is a doe deer walking right in front of my window. She's young. She's probably maybe a 2-year-old. Are you going to go on your way? It's a little distracting. So I, designed the rabbit. I had a couple other spring designs that were pretty close to being ready. And about a week before I was ready to launch, my entire computer, motherboard and everything blew up, and I had to have the entire thing replaced. And I had backed things up online, but I was having trouble with my cloud storage that now I figured out, and I didn't know that there were some things that weren't backing up correctly. You learn. So about that time, I just was like, for my own sanity, I can't do this. Like, I can't release anything right now. I have to jump ahead. So I decided to jump ahead to fall. Oh, here comes another deer. It's like a deer highway. She's like standing right in front of me. Keep going. They're not babies. Those aren't this year's. It has to be last year's. I think this one's last year's fawn. So I had to basically fix my laptop, spend several weeks doing that, getting things back how they needed to be. I have a lot of software, that I use through all this. Decided to jump to fall. And I know what this morning, I'm so close again. Like, I'm at that point right before my laptop blew up in the spring. I'm so close. And my husband said, he left for work on Friday, and I'm like, it's Thursday, right? And he goes, no, it's Friday. And I was just like, no, it can't be Friday. It has to be Thursday. And then today we took, our German Shepherd for a nice long walk, like I said, and we had breakfast at this little place, and one of these little mountain towns were nearby, and the maple trees are turning, and I'm just like, okay, I should have launched this stuff like a couple weeks ago, but I can't not do it again. Like, I can't. And then he's like, oh, today's the first day of fall. And I'm like, no, it's not. He's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, no, it's not. He's like, well, it is. So I'm like, I have fall patterns. I can't not release them again. So sitting there, I'm like, what am I going to do? I mean, all of them are so close. And I'm sure that this is the most inefficient way for me to do this. Like, I'm positive. So I thought, okay, I have to release something. I have to release something on the first day of fall. Like, I just have to. I have two very fall specific patterns. So I'm like, if I release one today, and then maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, I can release the other one. And then the last one I was planning on a release is kind of a general animal one. It's not, I mean, it's kind of fallish, but it's not really. So then I'm like, okay, and then I could, instead of like waiting until I get all three of these done, I think I just have to do one at a time. So on that note, since today is the first day of fall, and I guess either you will get excited about this and can go to my Etsy store and be like, there it is, and get it today, or you can watch my Instagram in the next couple days, and I'm going to try and release it as fast as I can. But this is like, just like I had the Fox in the Box winter on applique, I want to do a Fox in the Box every season. And I promise that none of the other ones will be this late or the beginning of that season. I'll give you a couple weeks warning. But this is my first cross stitch pattern in a wooden cheese box. It's my Fox in the Box, my fall Fox in the Box. And it's inspired by the aspen trees in Colorado that are definitely the signal of fall here, coming down. We went up a couple weeks ago to take a long drive through the South San Juans. My husband said he wanted to see if he could find raspberries, and it was very fun. He just drove along Forest Service roads, access roads, and looked out the side of his side, and was way better at spotting raspberry bushes in a moving vehicle than I was. And we periodically stopped and just fed off of raspberries. But it's aspen country up there, and I was already kind of thinking of doing this, and I just really studied kind of the characteristic of aspens when we were up there, and then came home and kind of finished out the chart of my aspens. I should say my work is very heavy on 3/4 stitch, fractal stitches. I use a gob of fractal stitches, mostly, well, 3/4 and half. And the reason I do that is because I like curves and jaggy points. And to get that, to get the same look, I would have to make this much larger if I didn't use fractional stitches. And I think that's a whole video in itself explaining that. But yeah, so that is my first cross stitch pattern release, fall Fox in a Box. It is on 18 count Aida. It is sized to fit into the 2-pound vintage wooden cheese boxes. Obviously, you could also do it just to frame it. You could do it as a pillow. You could do it larger in those things. It also would be very conducive for a drum or some kind of a, like a circle, circularly around something. And it's going to be a seasonal release. So this is, and you probably already know what kind of the winter fox is going to look like. But here's the funny thing. I've already designed and finished the spring one. It's done. My spring Fox in the Box is done because I thought I'd be releasing the spring Fox in the Box. Nope. So we're starting with fall. So hopefully I'm not going to talk much longer because I want to get off of this, get this edited, and and finish spruce up the PDF. The PDF of this is almost done. I just want to get my husband to do some spell checking on it and get this up on Etsy. And it is 2 o'clock Colorado time. I think if I can get this done before dark, I'll feel like I did a success in releasing my first cross stitch pattern and releasing it on the first day of fall. So that's my fox in the box. And like I said, you already know what the winter one looks like, and I already have the spring one done, and you already know what some other spring designs are going to be. So yeah, I got to start somewhere, and I wish I had more of a cohesive and larger line to show you, but I'm just not going to ever start if I don't get this out. So there it is. Oh my goodness. Oh, and I also want to say, humor me, because a lot of the stuff I need to learn. I intentionally, the fox in the boxes are going to only be charted in DMC, and they only are going to use the factory colors from Zweigart. No hand dyed in this series. I wanted to have a series that if you just weren't somewhere like I am, where you have access to those things, you could do this. And also, if you couldn't afford or couldn't justify the expense of the hand dyed, you would have a really nice project. But obviously, if you do have hand dyed, you could. If you look at the grass, I put texture in the grass because of that. That's 2 different colors of DMC. And the reason I did that was because I wanted some interest in the grass. If you choose to do this in a over-dyed green, I don't necessarily think I would include both of those colors in the texture. I probably would just stitch across with the over-dyed green and then show off the interesting texture or the interesting variegation of the hand dyed. This is on a blue 18 count Zweigart. You also could, if you only have a white or an off-white Zweigart or an Aida fabric or linen, you certainly could stitch that in between blue. And you could also, just because you wanted to, you could do a full coverage and then bring in a gorgeous blue hand dyed and then get some interesting texture in the blue. The lines across the aspens are completely across. I do a stitch called what I call a cheat back stitch. It's not your traditional back stitch. I actually went entirely across the whole width of the tree, brought my needle down, and then I came up in the center and I anchored those threads. And again, that's a whole nother video to show you why I like to do that instead of a traditional back stitch. Of course, it is a personal preference on how I like to do back stitches, but I'm gonna have some videos on my techniques. There is French knots as the ends of the leaves, if you can see. And again, I will have some videos up on my YouTube channel to show you kind of how I do my stitches. So I think that's everything. DMC thread, just very factory blue Aida. I think it's called light blue, if I remember correctly, but it's all in the pattern. And a certain texture of 2 different greens in the grass to give you some interest with the DMC. I also will put up a video on how I finish in the box, like how you make it where it, you know, it doesn't go all the way in, what my technique is, and then also how I pin stitch. I don't lace, and I'll kind of, I have a video that I've already done that I need to put up that shows that. So I have a lot of things to do, so just be patient with me. But I want to get the other fall pattern up before I kind of get into the how-to videos. So, you know, if you're interested in it, you can be stitching it, and then I'll come in and give you some tips in the next couple weeks. So, Fox in the Box fall. So I think that's it. Like I said, I'm going to get off so I can get these things done. And hopefully in a few days, I will be back on to show you another fall pattern. So thank you. And I have been looking forward to this. I need to start somewhere. That's exciting. And this, I guess, is going to be my starting point.